Hi, everyone. I'm Marc Bates. I'm a metabolic health coach, and today's topic is the FGF21 cycle. Okay, now this is interesting. I'm just going to make this statement here. This is something I'd planned to talk about, but probably far into the future. But somebody asked a question about this on a recent video that I released, and this is a community. This channel is a community, and I like answering questions from people and trying to provide the latest available research on this stuff. So in response to this question, this is something you might be interested in, the FGF21 cycle. Okay? So, within the complex orchestra of metabolic hormones, FGF21 stands as a conductor, orchestrating energy expenditure and glucose regulation with remarkable precision. This liver-derived protein has emerged as a critical regulator of metabolic health with profound implications for conditions ranging from obesity to diabetes. Fibroblast growth factor 21, FGF21, represents a fascinating intersection of endocrinology and metabolism. Its discovery has opened new avenues for understanding how the body adapts to nutritional changes and metabolic stress. But what exactly is the FGF21 cycle, and why has it captured the attention of researchers worldwide? Let's talk about the biology of FGF21. FGF21 belongs to the fibroblast growth factor family, but functions primarily as an endocrine hormone. Unlike other growth factors that stimulate cell proliferation, FGF21 regulates metabolic processes throughout the body. The hormone is produced predominantly in the liver, though smaller amounts can be synthesized in adipose tissue, fat tissue, pancreas, and skeletal muscle. Once released into circulation, FGF21 travels to target tissues where it binds to specific receptors. This binding requires a co-receptor called beta-klotho, which explains the tissue-specific effects of FGF21. Tissues expressing both FGF receptors and beta-klotho, such as adipose tissue and the liver, are particularly responsive to FGF21 signaling. The FGF21 cycle refers to the regulated production, release, and action of this hormone in response to various metabolic signals. This cycle plays a crucial role in maintaining energy homeostasis and adapting to metabolic challenges. What triggers FGF21 production? The liver produces FGF21 in response to several metabolic stressors. Fasting represents one of the most potent stimuli for FGF21 production. When glucose levels fall during prolonged fasting, the liver increases FGF21 synthesis to coordinate the body's adaptive response. Interestingly, protein restriction also triggers FGF21 production. Studies show that diets low in protein but high in carbohydrates significantly elevate circulating FGF21 levels, suggesting the hormone plays a role in protein sensing and metabolism. Ketogenic diets, characterized by high fat and low carbohydrate content, strongly induce FGF21 expression. This induction occurs through activation of the nuclear receptor PARA-alpha, peroxisome proliferator activated receptor alpha, a key regulator of fat metabolism in the liver. Cellular stress, particularly endoplasmic reticulum stress, can also trigger FGF21 production. This mechanism links FGF21 to the integrated stress response, positioning it as a protective factor during cellular distress. Alcohol consumption represents another trigger for FGF21 release. The liver produces FGF21 in response to alcohol intake, potentially as a protective mechanism against alcohol-induced metabolic disturbance. The metabolic benefits of FGF21. FGF21 exerts remarkable effects on energy metabolism and glucose homeostasis. One of its most striking actions is promoting the browning of white adipose tissue. This process transforms ordinary fat-storing white adipocytes into beige adipocytes capable of burning energy through thermogenesis. Research has demonstrated that FGF21 administration can result in a 20-fold increase in UCP1 expression in white adipose tissue. UCP1, uncoupling protein 1, is essential for thermogenesis, allowing mitochondria to generate heat instead of ATP. And this is important. If you had kids, remember how young kids, seem to never get cold, right? They always don't want to wear jackets going outside because they've got, babies are born with a large amount of brown fat, and kids maintain that brown fat level through their early ages. They're warm. That brown fat is burning off energy. That's why little kids burn off fat so easily and excess energy, and they're always warm. Well, as you get older, the brown fat stops producing as much, and you start getting more white fat, which doesn't add to your thermogenesis. Just keep that in mind. This can help you get younger again, right? This browning effect significantly enhances energy expenditure, making FGF21 a potential target for obesity treatment. Okay? Keep that in mind. Beyond adipose tissue, FGF21 improves glucose metabolism through multiple mechanisms. It enhances insulin sensitivity in skeletal muscle and adipose tissue, promoting glucose uptake and utilization. In the liver, FGF21 suppresses glucose production during fed states, helping maintain glucose homeostasis. Excuse me. FGF21 also influences lipid metabolism. It reduces triglyceride levels by increasing fatty acid oxidation and decreasing lipogenesis. That's the formation of new fat, primarily in the form of triglycerides. These effects contribute to improved lipid profiles and reduced fat accumulation in the liver. Very important. That's something we want to have happen. The hormone central nervous system effects are equally important. FGF21 crosses the blood-brain barrier and acts on the hypothalamus to regulate energy intake and expenditure. It suppresses sweet preference and alcohol consumption, suggesting a role in modulating reward-seeking behavior related to nutrition. We talk a lot about on the channel about how sweets, glucose, sugar that turns into glucose, goes into the blood and releases dopamine as a hormone, which goes into your brain's reward center, and actually it's like being addicted to sugar. You are, right? This helps reduce the effects of that. Very, very important. Okay, real quick. If you want to help the channel, I would appreciate it a lot. Press like, press subscribe. You press the button, you get notified when we release new videos. We release quite a few. This was very helpful to the channel, so once again, if you will do this, I appreciate it greatly. Thank you. Okay, FGF21 in disease contexts. Despite its beneficial metabolic effects, FGF21 levels are paradoxically elevated in several metabolic disorders. This apparent contradiction has led researchers to propose the concept of FGF21 resistance, similar to insulin resistance in type 2 diabetes. In obesity, circulating FGF21 levels are typically higher than in lean individuals. However, the metabolic benefits of this elevated FGF21 appear blunted, suggesting tissue resistance to the hormone's actions. This resistance may result from decreased expression of beta-klotho in target tissues or impaired downstream signaling. Type 2 diabetes similarly features elevated FGF21 levels. correlating with insulin resistance severity. The liver likely increases FGF21 production as a compensatory mechanism to counter metabolic dysfunction. Through this compensation proves insufficient to normalize metabolism. So your body is trying to fight the insulin resistance. Non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, NASH, also exhibit increased FGF21 levels. The hormone may serve as both a biomarker and a protective response against liver fat accumulation. Cardiovascular disease risk factors correlate with FGF21 levels as well. The hormone appears to have direct cardioprotective effects, reducing cardiac inflammation and improving cardiac function in experimental models. These observations suggest a dual role for FGF21 as both a biomarker of metabolic stress and an endogenous protective factor that increases in response to metabolic. The remarkable metabolic effects of FGF21 have generated substantial interest in its therapeutic potential. Native FGF21, however, has limitations as a drug candidate due to its short half-life and susceptibility to proteolytic degradation. To overcome these challenges, researchers have developed various FGF21 analogs with improved pharmacokinetic properties. In other words, they work better in a pharmaceutical setting. These include pegylated versions, Fc fusion proteins, and engineered variants with enhanced stability. Clinical trials with FGF21 analogs have shown promising results. Right? Recent studies of 2 drugs in patients with metabolic dysfunction associated with MASH have met their phase 2b endpoints, which means they're in process, demonstrating significant effects in both MASH resolution and fibrosis improvement. These analogs have demonstrated multiple beneficial effects in human studies, including weight reduction. FGF21 analogs typically produce modest but significant weight loss, likely through increased energy expenditure and reduced food intake. Improved lipid profiles. Constant reductions in triglycerides and LDL cholesterol with increases in HDL cholesterol have been observed across studies. Enhanced insulin sensitivity. FGF21 analogs improve glucose tolerance and insulin sensitivity, though the magnitude of these effects varies between compounds. And reduced liver fat. Significant decreases in hepatic fat content have been demonstrated, making FGF21 particularly promising for fatty liver disease treatment. The multi-system effects of FGF21 make it an attractive therapeutic option for metabolic syndrome, which encompasses multiple interrelated conditions including obesity, dyslipidemia, insulin resistance, and hypertension. Okay, personal note here. This is exactly the type of stuff we saw about the GLP-1 drugs, right? They're mimicking a natural body process that seems to affect weight loss and helping things. Remember, GLP-1s are very expensive. They are problematic. There's all kinds of issues going on right now where people are suing the drug companies over the results, over the side effects. And they have this big problem, which is as soon as you stop taking the GLP-1 drugs, the fat comes right back. Okay? I would think FGF21 type drugs, analogs, will suffer many of the same problems once it goes into long-term testing. Right? But the promise of having a drug you can take instead of actually eating properly is just a multi-billion-dollar industry. Okay? So, it's not here yet. I'm warning you. Watch out for these. Okay? Personal opinion only. Challenges and limitations. Despite its promise, FGF21 based therapy faces several challenges. The phenomenon of FGF21 resistance in metabolic disorders may limit efficacy in patients who would benefit the most from treatment. Understanding the mechanisms of this resistance and developing strategies to overcome it remains in an active area of research. In other words, the people who need it most seem to be resistant to FGF21 effects, right? So, giving them more of the drug, giving more FGF21 or an analog may not help if you're resistant to it. The requirement for parenteral administration presents another limitation. Current FGF21 analogs must be injected, which may reduce patient adherence compared to oral medications, right? Like the GLP-1s. You gotta shoot yourself in the stomach or something like that, right? Developing alternative delivery systems or small molecule FGF21 mimetics could address this challenge. The pleiotropic effects of FGF21 also raise concerns about potential off-target effects, side effects. While no major safety signals have emerged in clinical trials to date, long-term effects require further evaluation. Another consideration is the variable response to FGF21 treatment observed in clinical studies. Identifying biomarkers to predict treatment response could enable more personalized therapeutic approach, i.e., not everyone responds to it the same, right? The cost of biologic therapies like FGF21 analogs may limit accessibility, particularly for chronic conditions requiring long-term treatment. This economic consideration affects the potential public health impact of FGF21-based therapies. In other words, change your diet so that you produce the stuff yourself naturally. It's better for you. Okay, future directions. Research on FGF21 continues to evolve rapidly, with several promising directions. Combination therapies represent an exciting frontier. Preliminary evidence suggests synergistic effects when combining FGF21 with other metabolic regulators such as GLP-1, which I mentioned earlier, receptor and agonists, potentially enabling lower doses and reduced side effects. Tissue-specific targeting could enhance efficacy while minimizing unwanted effects. Developing FGF21 variants with preferential activity in specific tissues, such as adipose tissue or liver, might achieve this goal. These are things everyone's working on. Novel delivery approaches include mRNA-based therapies. Ooh, we heard that before. Show promise for improving the pharmacokinetics and reducing the production costs of FGF21-based treatments. Now, others are trying to figure out how to make it more cost-effective for you when you can just produce it yourself by eating properly. These approaches could make FGF21 therapy more accessible and convenient. Expanding therapeutic applications beyond metabolic disorders represents another frontier. Emerging evidence suggests potential benefits of FGF21 in aging, neurodegenerative diseases, and certain cancers, broadening its therapeutic horizon. They're always looking for other places they could sell it to. Once again, you can make it yourself by just eating properly. Understanding the physiological regulation of FGF21 could also inspire indirect approaches to harness its benefits. Dietary or lifestyle interventions that naturally increase FGF21 production might provide an alternative to pharmacological administration. Bingo! Big words there. Dietary or lifestyle interventions. Changing what you eat helps you produce your own FGF21. You don't need a pharmaceutical. Okay, conclusion. The FGF21 cycle represents a fundamental metabolic regulatory system with profound implications for health and disease. From its production in the liver in response to metabolic stress to its wide-ranging effects on energy metabolism, glucose homeostasis, and lipid handling, FGF21 emerges as a central coordinator of metabolic adaptation. The paradoxical elevation of FGF21 in metabolic disorders highlights the complex relationship between this hormone and disease states. Rather than simply categorizing FGF21 as a beneficial or harmful, we must understand it as part of an intricate regulatory network that responds to and shapes metabolic health. Therapeutic approaches targeting the FGF21 system show considerable promise for addressing the growing burden of metabolic diseases. While challenges remain, the remarkable effects of FGF21 on multiple aspects of metabolism position it as a potential cornerstone of future metabolic medicine. As research progresses, our understanding of the FGF21 cycle will undoubtedly deepen, revealing new insights into metabolic regulation and opening additional therapeutic avenues. This fascinating hormone exemplifies how basic biological discoveries can translate into meaningful clinical applications. Okay, and doctors I know who are working on this through dietary applications are. This is key point here. You don't need to take a drug, not that there's one available yet, to do this when you can do it through dietary intervention, potentially transforming our approach to some of the most prevalent health challenges of our time. Okay, couple quick questions everyone asks. How do I get my body to produce FGF21? Well, the way you do it is by fasting. Is the most, and this was covered, right? If you do a fast, and this is a full fast, 18 to 24 hours at least, if not more, seems to help produce FGF21 from the liver. The liver is responding to the stress of fasting, because as you're fasting, your glucose levels are dropping, and the liver is responding to that. Okay, you want that. The problem is most people don't fast for very long, right? And even intermittent fasting may not be long enough to stress the liver to the point that it releases this. The other thing is if you're eating high amounts of carbohydrates, that tends to reduce the release of FGF21 unless it's responding to the stress of an overconsumption of carbohydrates. So you say, oh, well, I'm producing FGF21 by overeating carbohydrates. No, that's not good. It's responding to the damage you're causing. Okay? One of the other things that's really interesting is it seems to respond to fructose. So there are a lot of people in this carnivore community talking about eating fructose, eating fruit again. Okay, couple problems with that. Too much fructose is bad for you and causes damage to your liver. Okay, so a little bit of fructose goes a long way, and you have to be pretty careful about not eating the fructose with protein and fat at the same time. So have a fruit snack maybe several hours in between eating a steak might work. Okay, but don't eat fruit thinking you're releasing FGF21 by itself. It's all part of this intricate dance of what's going on with the food you're eating. It's best not to eat much fruit at all and relying on this release. Remember, the liver is responding to stress. One of the best sources of FGF21 is a ketogenic diet. Initially, as you're switching from eating glucose, right, a standard American diet, to a ketogenic diet, your liver is responding to the drop in carbohydrates, sees that as a stressor, and it's going to release FGF21 against that. And that's good. That's part of the reason why people, when you start a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet, you start losing weight immediately. You start seeing body fat going away. You start seeing all these positive effects. They do go taper off and can be relatively quickly. Part of that has to do with the fact that if you're eating a good amount of protein, right, with as part of your daily meal plan, and that's somewhere between 1.8 to 2.2, let's say, grams per kilo of lean body fat, right? If that's kind of like the minimum. If you're eating plenty of protein, which is in that level or higher, you're not going to induce the liver to release a lot of FGF21. The liver wants to release FGF21 as part of a very low protein diet. So there are people in this community who talk about having low protein days or protein sparing days that release FGF21, and that does kind of work. But be careful with that. If you have too much of these protein sparing days, where you're not eating enough protein to meet your requirements for your lean body mass, you're going to start losing muscle tissue as the body tries to strip that of the amino acids that it needs for other functions. Okay? So I don't particularly like protein sparing days. The people I see who follow a lot of protein sparing and overdo it, they look very thin and not too healthy, right? And you know what I mean, right? They just don't look like they have a lot of muscle mass. So I don't particularly recommend that myself. Okay, so these are the things. But the biggest thing is this is a response to stress. As your body gets healthy, there's less stress. There's going to be less need to produce FGF21. So that's actually a good thing. All right? Okay, if you have questions, leave a comment. Thanks for watching. And remember, this is a community. I did this video here. I pumped it up in my schedule because somebody asked about it and made a comment about it. So I'm bringing it to you for that purpose. Thank you.